Original design is something that someone's done the first time. If the customer gives money to the companies who steal that idea, then what we're going to be left with on the planet is a bunch of junk.
Imagine designing a chair without knowing who will sit in it. You sketch, model, prototype, but never ask, who's it really for? In the end, it looks beautiful, but it creaks, it wobbles, and no one wants to use it. That's the trap of disconnected design, and it happens across architecture, industrial design, and project workflows. This week on Architecture Gone, we're happy to be joined with Betsy Lindell, a designer and product specialist, who's rethinking how we approach the design behind our projects. We'll uncover how investigating the users, embracing feedback loop, and applying product design principles of original design can lead to more intentional, original design and architecture. Stick around because at the end, we're diving into one of the most overlooked forces in design, original design. Hello and welcome to Architecture Gone. I'm Brandon Gibbs, your host, and today we have a special guest who's going to tell us about the world of interior design and manufacturing and awesome products that really bring a space to life, designing from the other side of the process as well as from the interior design side. It's very interesting story. I hope that you stay tuned for the full to hear more about what Betsy Lindell, our guest, has to offer in sharing about the design and room process, just creating spaces. Welcome to the show, Betsy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is a whole new experience for me to do a podcast interview like this. So thank you for having me on the show. Talking about, I remember our first conversation that we had at your office. It seemed like we could have just gone on forever. And I guess I take for granted how much of what I do day in and day out is not part of what so many people in our industry do day in and day out, because I'm in like this really tiny part of such a larger picture.
Yeah, it's the larger picture that people don't know from, they start out, designers starting out into the industry. And so like finding out about that makes, makes it easier to make informed decisions. So, and I thought that was also a very unique topic that Betsy shared. We'll go to in the show of the concept of original design. Guess let's start off. I'm really interested. Can you share with us a bit about your background and what initially sparked your interest in design and architecture and how it brought you to both WIT contract and pretty much where you are in the market now?
Well, sure. So I started off in interior design actually as a freshman in college. I that is when I discovered that interior design even existed as a profession. And when I went down the path, initially it was to I was very interested in residential design. But when I was a sophomore in college, I had a job working for a glass company, and we did custom shower enclosures and mirrors for residences. And I was very quickly cured of the desire to want to work on people's personal space. It was just really eye opening in the fact that most people in their homes, they're tied to so many things from a sentimental point of view, that the aesthetics and the big picture and the holistic kind of approach to shelter was just a lot more personal. I felt more like a therapist, and I was just doing their their bathroom shower enclosures. It wasn't like getting into other parts of the home. So the more I learned about interior design as a profession, and the more I got into the education side of it in school, I was very much drawn to the commercial side of things and really, first off, on the institutional side of things, buildings like healthcare environments, schools, places where people aren't necessarily choosing to spend their time, oftentimes are there, out of a sense of obligation, or, to heal, or because they've been brought there by their parents or families. And to me, that was really the most important thing, because if the occupant didn't have a choice in occupying the space, then what could the space do to still treat every occupant like a human being and make a consideration for what they might be experiencing throughout the day, help them to grow and expand kind of who they were as a person just by the environment that they were surrounded in. So that's kind of how I started, how I ended up, not ended up, but how I've, I guess, arrived is sort of more how I feel about it with WIC contract is um, really a lot of circumstance. I was working for a studio design firm during the economic downturn of 2008, got laid off along with dozens of other lower level, entry level designers in my firm, and found my way back to employment at a furniture dealership. That is that was sort of my first foray into the commercial furniture side of things. And I really, even though I had worked on large projects that involved furniture specification, I had no idea. It was like it stopped at the furniture, and I didn't know anything at all about where it came from, how it got to the place I wanted. I was concerned with what it looked like, how it functioned, and that's kind of sort of where I stopped. But being on the dealership side, on the sales side of that was definitely interesting. And then becoming a rep sort of naturally flowed from there, just to get into more detail about what it was that those choices were.
So you would say that you became more comprehensive as a designer by going to that other side. But at the same time, it sounds like you definitely saw things in the industry that were like, I'm not interested in. I guess, can you like describe in a more detail sort of like the parts that you really like and why those are important to you still? You became like a room consultant or a space consultant, and the idea is you're still performing like design, but you're choosing like the parts of design, like maybe an interior design, like if someone designing a room, they have to design everything and then at the same time they don't have like always the full tool set or the client is that interested, but at the same time now it sounds like there are parts that you chose. Can you go into that, what you bring with you from the design world?
As an architect or as an interior designer, you're going to be meeting with your client, and you're always trying to find out why, right? Why they want to make a change to their space, what they're trying to do in their space, what they're trying to accomplish with those that they're working around. One of my first jobs as an interior designer working for a large firm, I remember the principal saying, it's that headwater mentality, right? It's not who's your client, but it's who's your client's client. And so when begin something, receive a request, a lot of what I day to day is just designers asking me questions, making a request about, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do that? And I think it's always, I sort of like to hit the brakes more than just simply answer the question. So I'm a lot of times going to say, why? Can this do that? Well, sure, but why? Why are you wanting this to do that? What is the person using this object or using this space going to be doing in this space with this object? Why wanting to work this way? Why are they wanting this to function this way? Because if we're not thinking about the person in the space, what it is they're trying to do, or what it is they're trying to create for their clients, then we've lost a whole nother piece of the puzzle and a whole nother piece of the solution. So when I chose to move away from another firm that does the same thing that I do day in and day out, essentially it was to collect and represent brands underneath me that kind of also take that same approach. They're not just creating stuff to bring more stuff into the world. They're not just mass producing one item after another that's just a copy of the last thing, drive through manufacturing or stamped out manufacturing, but they really care about who's buying their product and why, what the final use is going to be, which to me brings a little bit more soul to the furniture itself. Because again, our industry is in and of itself almost the least sustainable thing we can be doing as humans. I mean, to be building public space and building new buildings and, building just, you
The
know,
footprint is itself,
yeah, I
yes.
mean, just using
Every
raw
building.
materials and energy and all of these resources that go into creating these spaces. If we hadn't done any of that, I think that we wouldn't be in the position we're at in terms of where we're at with the environment on a global scale. Yet the people that that are as like very closely connected to creating those buildings and those places and those spaces are almost more conscious of where we're at. And so for me, the furniture piece of it is kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? Because at some juncture we're going to hit capacity with what we can do with new construction. At some point that is going to have to slow, and we'll be forced to work within the parameters of the buildings that already exist here. And so for me, that really comes down to what we're doing on the inside, what we're doing with finishes, what we're doing with lighting, and what we're doing with furniture. Because that's the last piece of the puzzle. That's creating the air that the people breathe that are inside of the place. That's creating the environment that we're providing for someone to live, work, play, thrive, think, create, all of those things.
And that's jumping ahead definitely to that sustainability definitely questions, because I think sustainability is a part of our responsibility that it seemed like you just forgot it during the Industrial Revolution. And now it's like, oh, now we have to face it. So I'm
Right.
definitely going to touch on that topic. And the why is also an important thing you bring up, because that's something that people will consider, after being motivated for like so many years by school or grades or the job. Why is going to be such an important thing, and at the same time, why exit at the end. So that's a great point. What are some experiences, personal experiences and influences from your early design career that help shape that approach as a product consultant?
I guess I'll take it back to school again, too. I had a professor who was constantly reminding us when we would get up to present our work, we were not to ever use the word my project, because while it may be work that you produced, her goal was to make sure we remembered that it was our client's project. Because for me too, I have all of my opinions. I have things that I like and don't like. I have seen things work and I've seen things not work, but it's not up to me to say, you don't want that. Trust me, you don't want that. Because I can't know where you're coming from unless I dig into the why and the how and the, what makes you tick. Again, why are you doing this? You have a client too, right? All of our clients have clients. And I think about it all the time, just standing up there in front of my classroom, presenting my project, and my teachers saying, this is not your project. You will never have a project unless you are the one who's going to be writing the check for everything that has to be paid for. Then it's your project. When someone else is paying you for your work, for your time, it's their work. It's actually for them. So when you talk about the things that you're producing for your client for their project, it's something that I keep top of mind pretty much every day, because we are in a service based industry, right? But I'm the commodities. I'm the stuff, the things. Yet at the end of the day, those things and those that stuff and those things, they're also at the end of their life going to be at the beginning of their life, right? So as I see the process through, the furniture will get installed at some point, the finishes will get installed at some point, and then there will be a closing meeting of sorts, and the client will then move forward in this space with these things. And what's attached to that,
Hmm.
hopefully, is an emotion that that attaches a good experience to the process so that they're happy the end result. I mean, there's nothing better than walking through a project and the client saying, I'm so happy with what we've been able to accomplish here, because that's it. You're like, yes, we did it. We talked about all this stuff at nauseum and we did all of this work, and all of these people from this big team did all of this work. And now you're happy and you can move forward doing what it is you come into this space to do.
More that fulfillment experience, like actually the word fulfillment versus the buyer's remorse that happens after maybe buying a expensive car.
My gosh, yeah, we do not want buyer's remorse. you know, uh,
Absolutely.
did you just buy a new
Yes,
car?
I did not. I did not, but I've definitely felt that experience after a purchase, or I've heard of other people more experiencing. Like I've been a little more wily in my recent, but in terms of when you get a new car, or the idea is that's a telltale sign of you think about the design, like people designers in school may not be considering that, but like, yeah, after someone pays a certain amount, or they move, like moving to a new apartment and finding something we don't like, but when you're moving to something that you have bought, like a building, a space, the idea is you can tell when someone has put thought into it, or when you've just, oh look, I've you know it's a great emotion point to have that you're feeling the emotion relating to that for the client, and that will read through in how you exercise the design or any part of design that you're working on. Can you tell us a moment in your career that you are sort of proud, sort of that sort of where you got to find that why and take it through? And if you could feel free to share any story or recent, or how that, because I think that sounds like a really wonderful way of an approach to a project.
What's interesting is part of the reason that I'm here in Tennessee is because I was working with my previous company. I was in Mississippi, and I had been before that in Atlanta. There was a dealer in Tennessee that wanted to create an exclusive rights to sell arrangement with one of the factories that we represented. We weren't really doing a whole lot of volume across the state at the time, and so it seemed like a good idea. It's actually part of the reason that I moved to Tennessee was for that opportunity to work with this one particular factory and the relationship that we were trying to forge with this one dealer. To make a very long story short, 8 years later, I am with a new group, under a new umbrella, with my own LLC, and was just rehired by that same factory after the relationship did not work out with their previous representation or that dealer, who is actually now out of business as well. However, there are 3 different dealers across the state where people who worked for that dealership now are working. And when I was able to come back to them and say, I have this new relationship with this company, they all were so excited. They were all just thrilled, because it's a family run business that asks all of those why questions every single day. And all of these people are now in companies that are approaching projects in the same way. And I'm now, in the driver's seat, so to speak, in a business, asking those same questions. And we're all really excited to get to work together again for projects with this particular product. For me, that's more of a story about, business coming full circle, I guess, than than finding that why. But it's been a really important lesson for me to say, if you just stay the course, like if you just do the right thing for the right reason, it will work out, it will come back around, and things will align so that even though I sell stuff, to me it's more important the people that I'm working with, because that's the real sustainable part of our industry, right? The stuff will come and go, but if the people who, the core kind of people enacting these processes in all of these different facets of what we do, if we can stay in our roles and continue to grow and develop our talents, then we are bringing a higher level of service to our clients, and that's all just going to continue as we age into our careers.
In some sense, you're focusing on the people that you work with and some principles, but you're understanding the industry doesn't change immediately. Before we jump into our feature segment about original design with Betsy Lindell, here's a quick word from our sponsor. This episode on original design and product selection is proudly sponsored by iamthestudio, your go-to resource for matching design, BIM, and CAD software. Whether you or your team is looking to sharpen technical skills or optimize your design strategy with the latest AI tools, iamthestudio has you covered. They even offer you a comprehensive set of tools on industrial design, interior design, and other CAD courses. Available right now in the episode links to help you get started elevating your modeling methods and design. As a special bonus for our listeners today, we will use the code AVOriginal2025 at checkout for a 15% discount on courses. Let's get into it now then. Insights into more responsible design and product selection design using the basis of original design. Sort of talking about that process that maybe the companies operate. But I guess if you could talk about how do you approach the process of helping designers reimagine and renew workspaces to make them inspiring and functional, how would you go about that approach?
It goes back again to why. What are you trying to accomplish here? Why are you wanting to create a new space or create a change in your space? And as soon as you ask those kinds of questions, a lot of times people will say, here's my program. I need 4 offices and a conference room and this open office. But if you ask them, well, what do people do in the conference room? And what do people do in these offices? And what do people do at these workstations? You can usually carve out some third spaces. And that to me is where we really thrive as humans, in that third space, right? We don't necessarily want to be tied to a computer in a box. We don't necessarily want to be sitting around a table, discussing all the ideas when we don't have enough hours to even execute the ideas. We're active, interactive creatures. And so to provide more spaces to interact and create, to be hands on with work, even in a company that might be highly, highly digital, that's even so much more important, to make sure that you're providing space within the space for those humans to come together and interact in a relaxed manner. And so bringing those third spaces back into the floor plan and having considerations for just casual conversation, for wellness, those are the kinds of areas within even a really small footprint. Companies will lease, say, a 5,000 square foot space, and they might have 20 people that come to work in and out, and that doesn't seem like a lot of space. But if you shrink the areas where people are just doing desk work, you can carve out and find so much more space within a footprint, and reorganize things in a manner that allows us to just be more interactive when we come into the building, when we come into that space to be together. Because that is why we do this, right? That is why we have this built environment, is to connect with one another. And so it's so important that when we create these places to come together, that we're really allowing for people to come together.
That third space, that between the lines, getting back to human, you won't just create a product listing for things that are missing some
Mhm.
essential components. I think that's really empowering them to do our jobs. Because it I could definitely tell, like, in terms of laying out so many different spaces, we can sometimes have too much big picture and forget the people that inhabit it. So
Box. I mean, we do it all the time. We work on these fit plans, and you're like, here's how everything fits. But then, imagine yourself as a person coming into this place and what this person's going to do throughout the day. Where are they going to walk to? What's the path that they take to get from point A to B to C to D? And are they sequestered from their colleagues? Are their clients coming in and having a bizarre experience because they're not able to interact with the people that they've come to visit or that they've come to experience, working with. So it's just taking the focus back to the person in the space, why they're there, and then why they're inviting other people to come in and be, welcomed guests in their space.
the client can sometimes forget their client. That's the worst situation for the architect, to make the client so informed about architecture they forget about people. We will avoid that. I'm really interested in the furniture aspect, like we said before, because again, these are the products, these are the brands. So I have the question of, when advising on furniture selection, which is like, the idea is you're not just providing one furniture. It's a program. What factors do you consider most important? How do you ensure they align with the designer's vision and the client's need?
There's a lot of factors. What's most important to me doesn't really matter. It's what's most important to the client. So asking that question again, sometimes a designer will come to me and tell me what's important to them, right? And if I fail to ask the question, what conversations have you had with your client? And there's a laundry list. When do they need furniture by? How much do they want to spend? How much are they allowed to spend or can they spend? When will they be able to have those funds appropriated for this job, and does that align with when they want to move in? If it's a really short time frame and I forgot to ask that question, then a designer might come to me and say, hey, I want something that looks like this. Do you have recommendations? And then yes, I send them a bunch of recommendations. The client falls in love with everything. Well, guess what? They can't afford it, and it's not going to get here in time for their project. I've not done my job and I've missed the boat on the service aspect, right? So, what's most important to me is getting to the root of all of the details as quickly as possible, I guess, because then I can help guide. Or it may be, I don't have anything. I don't have anything that fits her need, but you know who might? And I'm going to recommend one of my, supposed competitors. But again, I was just on a call with four of them earlier this afternoon. We do events together all the time. We're actually fairly familiar with one another's products. And I'd rather make a recommendation like that to someone if I know that they have something that I don't have that I can't provide, because again, that's just further helping to support the design community and provide the customer with the best service possible, even if it's not, directly coming back to me. I think that it's important to just to get the big picture of what everyone's trying to accomplish as soon as possible so that we can work together on what people are looking for.
So that hits me to more the now the I guess it's a little more conceptual, the concept of original design. Can you talk about, where does a concept like original design come in? Like, essentially, original design, from my understanding now, is like original design involves balancing creativity with practicality, but at the same time, there's a particular concept that you presented about it. How does that play into that picture of selecting the furniture?
You can always spend less money up front to purchase something that has been knocked off by the original designer. That's always the case. That's actually, unfortunately, the case in your industry too, right?
Walk us through what original design is in your own words.
Original design is something that someone's done the first time, right? So they're the first person to create this particular design, whether it's a product or a complete solution. and they don't just say, oh, I have this idea, and then, oh, here's this product, right? There's research invested, there's time invested, there's money invested in prototypes, in testing. There's material and considerations so that you're using very specific metals or very specific textiles or very specific wood, all with certain considerations for where it came from, how it's harvested, it's implemented in manufacturing, for considering the safety of workers and that environment, how it's transported, what happens to it at the end of its life. All of these things are taken into consideration during the process of creating, just one piece of furniture. So obviously, when that one piece of furniture is then sold, there's a cost associated with it that doesn't just represent the thing and the material and the labor. It might represent years of an investment up to this point. And it's not as if, the customer then has to pay this person's, backlog of hours, for instance. But if the customer doesn't pay for it or is not willing to pay for it, and instead gives money to the companies who steal that idea, pluck it right out of thin air from where it was birthed, if you will, then what we're going to be left with on the planet is a bunch of junk.
Mm.
Is a bunch of junk that's irresponsibly made, that's irresponsibly sourced, that is made in unsafe environments, that is we're crushing innovation. We're literally just crushing innovation if we're unwilling to support innovation. Then spending dollars on someone who has stolen that work means we're going to be left with nothing but a bunch of copycats. And at some point, that's not sustainable. That's going to end up with a lot of people who would be designers having to leave the profession altogether, having to go make money elsewhere. Because if they go through this process and they've done everything right and they've created a product that's doing all the right things for the right reasons, but yet people aren't willing to pay for what that entails, they're going to have to leave and do something else with their life to create a vocation for themselves. And if over and over and over that happens, then we're left only with thieves, but they have nothing left to steal from. So then we just, it's like if you have provided plans to a client and gotten contractor prices for them, and then they end up taking your work to someone who doesn't interpret your plans correctly or tries to cut corners on what you had proposed, and then calls you a year later and wants you to fix stuff, it's kind of hard to go backwards, right? Once you're trying to go down this path, if you veer too far off of it, it can be kind of hard to get back.
That's a way for architects to understand what's happening on another sphere of design or designers in general. I think that's a good illustration point. Now that now that we've identified some of that other edge to like the ethic behind quality selection, could you name some of your, I guess, maybe some leaders comfortable mentioning some of the brands and sort of that are really standing out, and the idea is that's what we're looking for? Which ones really stand out to you?
Sure. Well, Bernhardt Design is one of my, I guess, charter brands, if you will. They were the first company to open up the territory of Tennessee and Mississippi to me when I came on board under the WIT umbrella. And their entire philosophy is their whole model is producing products that have a designer behind them. So, like their entire existence is because of their support of innovation across the globe. So they're actually, they're one of the founding members of Be Original Americas, which is a nonprofit organization that I discussed in our, in my presentation initially to you. And I think, and when they put out when they introduced a product to their line, they not only costed appropriately based on, material source and supply, investment, engineering, etc., but they factor in a payment of royalties to the original designer throughout the life of offering the product in their line. So they don't just buy an idea, they don't just take one thing. We have some products in our line that have been in our line for 15 plus years, which means every single time that product is sold, the original designer makes money. And we've, by that model, there are dozens of designers across the globe that run full-time furniture design studios. And they come back, to work with us year after year after year because they're able to. Because they're not just designing for Bernhardt Design. They're designing, in El Salvador, in Germany, Mexico. They're able to live and work where they are from and support their local design community. They're able to support their local suppliers and, manufacturing on the tooling side or on the molding side or in the finishing department. They're able to create new processes and procedures to create all kinds of new things. So that's really exciting. And then there's Carnegie Fabrics. So they're a textile manufacturer that owns the manufacturing for most of their products. One in particular, which is designed in-house by them and is still manufactured 100% in-house by the company itself. So nothing is outsourced. And they created a product in 1981 that was a woven polyethylene. So it was originally an extrusion from natural gas. And it's now in its 40th year. It's on. We have a version of that same product, which is over 92% bio-based material, which has been derived from rapidly renewable sugarcane. And so you think about literally 4 decades of process innovation, ingenuity, reinvested into this one product, which can be a wall covering, it can be an upholstery, it can be wrapped acoustic panels. It has a number of different applications, but over the course of its life, it's now, a 92% bio-based material and with the same performance characteristics, completely PVC free, and, just a unicorn in its category. And so that's exciting to have products like that and to, represent companies with those just core they have goals that they're focused on and they've stayed true to that. And so it shows
They're not just chasing profits like maybe some corporations now is like definitely that's all you sort of think about.
Yeah, no,
It's
I mean, gosh, we've had good years and we've had bad years.
mm,
But by and large, sticking with the staying the course on why you're trying to sell what you're trying to sell, in the end, it always works out, you know? It always works out because, the rising tide is going to lift all ships. And so if make sure that you're keeping all of these things in consideration as you're producing a product, then as people choose to support that business model, that structure, it can continue to grow in a meaningful, positive way. And it's, It's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah, and it's exciting to hear this story. Yeah, and the continuous support that it's creating for innovation, and that idea that's like, and if you choose to work with some brands, I think at the end you'll share like your contacts so that people can know where to find out about some of those more exciting brands that are doing something. And
You can go to betsylindell.me. You'll see all my brands that I represent there.
can you share some insights that you would tell to a designer sort of choosing either because the idea is like some designers, they're going to find that good path with manufacturing or with team of brands. What would your advice be to someone starting out who's considering that? I suppose like you could give advice for a little bit of both, a little bit someone who's really wants to be more involved, because again, like without these conversations, someone who's just in their studio module, they'll never like really pierce the veil. So the idea is like but someone who is just to get more involved in learning about it, and also those who might find opportunity with it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my advice would be, never assume. Never assume that someone doesn't want or need your help or wouldn't be interested to sit down and have a conversation with you. It's a little tricky. Like I said, I started college and I didn't even know that interior design existed. I was working at an architecture firm, and even though reps were calling on me and they were coming in and out the door, I had no idea what they did. I remember saying, I can never be a rep. I remember saying that as a young designer working at an architecture firm. I remember just thinking, I could never do that. And I think it's because I really had no idea what they did. And also what I was doing as it related to the bigger picture. So I think, if you're just starting out, or you've been in your role for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, even, you're still new. You're gaining experience every day. I still learn stuff every day. Never assume that what you've learned and what your experiences are anything less than valuable, because you are going to bring something to the table anywhere you go that is going to be different from what someone else, is starting off with. I think there's a saying about bed and breakfasts, that they're always for sale. Like an inn is always for sale because an innkeeper is like always looking for a way out. I would say, you know, keep your reps in mind. If you're looking for a change, or even just a summer, extra earning opportunity, hit us up, because I think probably we're all short on time, and you'd be surprised where an opportunity lies if you just ask the question, do you need help, or would you be willing to talk to me?
That's really great to hear. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's like we just got lost in some great conversations, but I think
Yeah, it is after 7.
you've shared the betsylindell.me. That's where people can find out more about you and more about what you do in terms of product selection and the brands that are really making a difference. Is there any other links that you want to share?
You can follow me on Instagram. I'm at my stuff, your space.
Absolutely. That's going to be in the episode,
And that is
and people can find
my
out about that.
almost daily posts by my 12-year-old daughter. So apologies in advance for any
It's a family
weirdness.
business.
Yes, family business. She's an excellent employee.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Betsy. Thank you again to the audience, Architects Beyond, for watching. Again, you can look at the links in the description below for whether you're listening to the video or just the podcast. Go ahead and find out more about the world of products and really designing and finding out your why with those links. Again, I'm your host, Brandon Gibbs. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next episode of Architecture Beyond. Hey, thank you so much for watching through this episode of Architecture Beyond, this special episode featuring Betsy Lindell, She talks about the original design concept and responsible products selection for designers. To take advantage of our sponsor iamthestudio offer, head to iamthestudio.com with coupon code AVOriginal2025 for the best in CAD and BIM courses for architects and designers.